Rock Jocks does not express the views of any Mountain West Conference members or their affiliates.
If you smell what the Rock is cooking.
Some big games, some bad games, and then there was San Diego. It's time for another episode of Rock Jocks.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Rock Jocks from the Front Row Network. We're your hosts, Preston Croshaw.
I'm Steve Schwartzman.
Let's get it started. I'm excited to talk about football because football is amazing and
Wonderful invention.
Yeah, yes, I agree. More of an adaptation, but we can get to that later. What's the plan for today, Steve?
Well, for starters, let's take a quick trip around the conference. San Diego State gets pounded by Ohio State in Columbus.
New Mexico gets an overtime win against UTEP.
Hawaii at one point has a tie with Oregon State, but ends up losing big by 19.
Wyoming puts the hurt on Idaho.
Cody Fajardo does Cody Fajardo things as Nevada beats UC Davis by 29.
Utah State and Air Force battle it out, and Chucky Keaton comes up on top.
You heard about Derek Carr? He's actually pretty good at what he does. Fresno State over Cal Poly by 16.
Colorado State loses a close one to Tulsa.
UNLV can't find any lady luck as they lose to Arizona.
Tennessee Martin gets absolutely killed by the Broncos, but what did we expect?
What a shocker. And San Jose State works hard, but loses a tough one to Stanford. That's our look around the conference. What are your thoughts about this week before we move on, Preston?
Better than last week, but that's not very hard. And a lot of things that we expected to happen happened, and that's about it, really.
Honestly, felt good to be back at normalcy. I think it was good to see some impressive performances. Some players really stepped up, and we're excited to bring those guys up. We do have one specific team where we've got some concerns with, ready to talk about. Really quick, we're going to run a new segment called Who's at the Peak, and we're going to talk about some of our players of the week. So, Preston, who do you have at the peak from last week?
At the peak, I have Chucky Keaton. I mean, the guy was amazing. Threw for 5 touchdowns to 5 different wide receivers. Ran the ball really well as well. He's really emerging on the national stage, and I can't say why not. And then my other guy, Isaiah Burse from Fresno State, 2 return punts for touchdowns. I mean, he was really the difference maker in that game. It was a great all-around performance by him as well.
At the peak over in New Mexico, I've got to give big props to Casey Carrier. I thought New Mexico's win against UTEP was actually pretty impressive and was all honestly on Carrier's shoulders. You would even say that he carried them.
Nice.
291 yards. Very impressive day. Got a lot of props on ESPN for his performance. Hopefully this is the start of something big for the running back. It was really nice to see him be successful. Then I got to go with my absolute best friend in the whole wide world, Brett Smith in Wyoming. Big win against Idaho. He started off that game 1 for 10, ended up throwing 295 yards for 4 touchdowns. He did squeak out an interception, but was able to overcome that. So far, 8 touchdowns on the year. He's got over 600 yards passing. Starting off the year, great, really impressive win.
Well, of course you wanted to talk about Brett Smith, so
I always want to talk Brett Smith.
Why not? And so that's our at the peak. We're going to try and do that from time to time, maybe every week if there's people that deserve it.
People are at the peak, but really quick, I want to talk about a team that's about at the bottom of the mountain, and I think it's time that we called them out. In really quick, it's just frustrating to even bring up. I just really want to quote, really quick, San Diego's own Ron Burgundy when I say that we have an urgent and horrifying news story, and everyone listening needs to stop what they're doing and listen now. Because it's time that we got honest and said, SDSU, you're just not cutting it. And I think we really need to talk about you played Ohio State, but I just think, Preston, your overall thoughts on the state of San Diego State football.
Well, before the show, you asked me a question that was a legitimate question. What is worse, losing to an FCS team like you did, or getting just blown out by Ohio State's backup quarterback?
Absolutely.
And that's an absolutely valid question. My opinion on it is the FCS loss. I mean, you're losing to Eastern Illinois. Yeah, it's a good FCS team, but I expected great things out of this team. I really did. Jake Feely, man, the hair should have won these games for him. You know what I'm saying? Well, maybe not.
Well,
the
you
Ohio
can talk
State.
hair, but Jake Feely is an impressive defenseman at the same time. That should be a solid defense that can really slow a team down, and they haven't been. In
and
all
it's
honesty.
been terrible. It's been an absolute travesty to watch. And you look at these guys; they should be good on paper. And I realize that Adam Uema went down in the first game, early in the first half, with an injury, and you don't want to re-aggravate that against Ohio State. But I don't know. I'm really disappointed with this team. I was expecting great things, and they have absolutely just performed terribly. This looks like a one-win team right now.
Yeah. Adam Dingwell, through his first 2 games, is 27 for 68 for 318 yards and 0 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That honestly isn't going to cut it necessarily anywhere. And I know I honestly go with the Ohio State loss being a bigger loss in the sense of how it happened. You can't necessarily say, oh, they're gonna be able to pull off an upset by any means. But I mean, you should be able to pull off more than 7 points. You should be able to slow down. Ohio State's backup is probably better than most people's starters. But at the same time, that's not what their game plan is. They run their game plan around Braxton Miller, and for you as a offense, as a defense, to not be able to slow that down. What really, I grab it again. This should be a solid with Nat Bear, with Jake Feely. This should be a much more impressive defense, and I don't understand how they seemingly can't find ways to stop the ball. They couldn't do it at all against Eastern Illinois. They had absolutely no chance against Ohio State. I don't honestly see it against Oregon State. They may not pull off anything close to a win until week 4. It's kind of disappointing to see because I think both of us had SDSU third in the division.
Mm-hmm.
I had them as a bowl. I had them as a potential bowl team. It's just not looking like it right now.
No, I've been. Not only have I not been impressed with Adam Dingwell, I have been horrified by his performances. They are just terrible. The guy throws to the other team more than he throws to his own team. And so, well, not really, but it seems that way, you know?
Yeah, you get that feel.
There is a glimmer of hope with Quinn Kaler coming in and performing admirably at Ohio State, but the Wampus Cats are looking to be the worst team in the conference right now.
What do you think can save the Aztecs?
You need Adam Uema back. You need him back. And I think that Rocky Long's defense has to get in gear. I think their defensive scheme is really cool. I love the way they run things with the Aztec and the Warback, and we love those names, by the way. But you can't win games if you can't move the ball, if you're turning over the ball, and you can't stop the other team.
Absolutely. I agree. Adam Uema needs to get back into full strength. He's kind of their meal ticket. But Nat Bear and Eric Pinkins need to force turnovers. It's more than just tackles for what they need. If they expect any success, they really need to not only stop the ball, but get opportunities to get the ball more into the hands of their offense. And then on top of that, when they get the ball in the hands of their offense needs to produce. That comes out of Uema's hands. But at the same time, I understand that you're a run-plus game, but you're also not a pass game with the way Adam Dingwell's been playing. You need to have some sorts of representation, and I'm not looking at that. And I agree. There's a little glimmer of hope at quarterback, but it's not by much.
Yeah, it's just a glimmer, and hopefully they can get things figured out. But for now, I mean, we've said all that we can say about you Wampus Cats.
Absolutely. So, So get on Twitter at MWC Rock Jocks. If you think we're being a little too harsh with San Diego State, we'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts. If you have some commentary of your own, what you think could save the San Diego State Wampus Cats, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So tweet at us, let us know. With that, this past week, our game of the week was Air Force hosting Utah State University, hosting the Aggies. This is a very impressive win for Utah State. But let's have a little breakdown. What were your impressions on last week's matchup of the week? I
really enjoyed watching Chucky Keaton play. And I tweeted this out after the game, I said, if you like football and you're not talking about Chucky Keaton, you should be. Because he's incredible. And after the broadcast, CBS Sports legitimately talked about him as a Heisman candidate for like 15 minutes.
It was
They
fantastic.
didn't just talk about Utah State. They talked specifically about CK16.
Yeah.
You know, and I really think that he's just a pleasure to watch. It was a little bit sloppy in the first half. Penalties from the Utah State defense, as well as, you know, you look at all the drops for the Air Force offense. I mean, the Falcons couldn't catch anything through the air, which is unfortunate. But overall, I thought it was a really good game. What did you think, Steve?
I thought it was great. I just want to point some out really quick. So I asked you how you thought this conference did as a whole over the week, and you sent me a long text, and you gave me a sentence for each team, just how they did as a whole. I want you to share with everyone the sentence you had about Utah State's performance this week. This was for the team as a whole, what you said.
Well, I was recapping the whole week, and I said Chucky Keaton is the master of the universe.
And I couldn't agree more. I was so impressed with his performance. But one thing is, as much as you want to give props to Chucky Keaton, you have to give huge props to that wide receiver core. Anyone who was following Utah State football coming into this season, the big consensus was our biggest concern is a wide receiver. We don't have anyone here to catch balls for Keaton. And I don't know that it can be any different than all of those doubters. This receiving team is strong. They're fast. They're effective. And one player to start looking out for after watching a specific play he had was Ronald Butler, one of their JUCO transfers. He had one catch for a touchdown, but it wasn't the catch. It was what got him into the end zone. This kid has blazing speed.
Yards after catch for this guy, I look at him as just a home run threat every time he touches the ball. He's so fast. You see, he catches the ball. He's facing his own line of scrimmage. So he has to turn around to make forward progress. When he turns around, he accelerates to maximum speed in about 2 seconds. It was incredible. And the Air Force safeties and cornerbacks were almost taken aback. Like, I didn't know this guy was this fast.
When you look at the roster, this is a team full of fantastic ball catchers. At tight end, they're very strong with Keegan Anderson and DJ Talavera. They've got a great leader in their receiving corps in Travis Van Leeuwen, who has done a great job. Brendan Swindle's very impressive. If you haven't had a chance to watch a player like JoJo Natson, he's playing so much bigger than his size.
Well, that's honestly, he is the smallest football player at the Division I level I have ever seen. I was actually talking with JoJo at my place of employment the other day.
Oh wow!
And I was like, dude, ain't nobody stopping you on the slant route, because nobody can stop him. He's so quick and so small. He just makes that 3-step slant and turns in. Well, Chucky Keaton hits him every time.
It reminds me of whenever I play NCAA 14, because I don't do that all the time.
I do.
If I'm ever third down, I always run curl route right, because I know that's going to get me a first down every single time. The curl route right at Utah State is the JoJo slant.
Yeah.
It works every time. He can get through guys. It's very effective. And we could talk receivers all day, but I just think that there's strengths everywhere. The one thing that I do want to say, though, is that as impressive as this game was for USU, it does show off a bit of their weakness, which honestly is in their secondary. They essentially gave up an entire touchdown possession through
penalties.
Through flags. In one, I think they gave up two pass interference calls and a holding call.
Yeah.
In one single possession, and that's just something that it didn't cost them now, and you got to hope it won't cost them in the future.
I agree. If we want to talk about the Utah State secondary, I almost chalk that bad performance in the first half up to being over-prepared, quote-unquote, for the triple option, because they had never seen this offense before. Well, not in the last 40-something years. And they had to prepare for the triple option because they really went into this game anticipating Air Force to run the ball, maybe pass 8-9 times in the entire game. But they passed more than that. They were running play action all day long, and Utah State secondary just got caught anticipating the run. One last shout out to a position group. These guys never get any love. Offensive line. These guys dominated. Obviously, they're a lot bigger than the Air Force defensive line just because of the nature of the Air Force Academy. But they they gave great protection for Chucky Keaton to throw to those receivers. It was an all-around very good performance by everyone except slightly not so much by the secondary for the Aggies.
Absolutely. Now switching the ball over to Air Force. Obviously they're playing shorthanded with an injured quarterback. So as far as stepping in, I can't say that we needed a terrible job.
No, absolutely not.
But decent job. He did rush for 48 yards, which was decently impressive. I got so lost with, I'm going to count really quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys, 12 guys on Air Force got a carry in this game.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of their offense, man.
Yeah.
I mean, we can expect that. And when you're talking about Jaleel Awini, I thought that he did quite well. I thought that his passes were quite crisp. He looked pretty darn good. If it wasn't for those drops, I mean, he went 4 for 12. Yeah, that's really not impressive. But how many of those hit his receivers right in the hands? And they dropped it.
Huge.
I can think of a couple where the tight end is coming across on just a flat route. He hits him right in the numbers. The tight end juggles and drops it.
Yeah. MacArthur had 3 specific drops that were, if those catches were made, this could have been a different game.
I agree.
They could have turned things around. And some of those were saved by pass interference calls. And that's hard to put out. But one thing I want to say about the rushing game is I know the triple option's your thing. 12 guys carried the ball for a total of 162 yards.
Well, you got to look at Utah State's defensive line and linebackers. I mean, they're beasts. And that's even missing their number one defensive end in Connor Williams, who was out kind of just nursing a minor injury. They felt that they didn't need him, and they really didn't. I mean, they were able to dominate the point of attack every single play. The Falcons couldn't get going. But that being said, I think that there are positives for Air Force coming out of this game. Our man Devin Rushing got a couple carries. There we go. Devin Rushing, baby.
Gotta love you some rushing.
Yeah.
Love that name.
Obviously, he's kind of far down on the depth chart, but I still love him anyway. This game for Air Force, I think that it proves one thing as a positive for Air Force, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about this, that Troy Calhoun is an excellent coach, and he knows how to prepare his team for each individual game. They came into this game with a game plan that would have worked if they had executed better. They came into this game knowing that Utah State was going to over-prepare for the run. And so they ran play action, play action, play action. And most of the time it worked except for just stone hands.
Absolutely. So based on their performances this week, where do you think our game of the week takes our components? First of all, what do you think the victory takes Utah State for the rest of the year? What do you make from it?
I think that Utah State proved that they are here to play. I mean, it was their first Mountain West Conference game. They're here to compete for the Mountain Division title as well as the whole conference crown. I look at Air Force. This game kind of just tells me that they're going to have a little bit of a down year, unfortunately. But when you're missing Cale Pearson with a torn ACL like they are, Jaleel Awini is going to be a capable backup, but I look at them as probably a 4 or 5 win team this year. They have a tough schedule. They've got to play, obviously, the whole Mountain Division as well as teams like Notre Dame. So I think that this is a good measuring stick for them.
I could definitely agree with that, and I think the biggest thing, I agree wholeheartedly on Air Force. The one side on the Utah State thing is there were wins in this conference with bigger margins and higher points, but through and through, Utah State had the most impressive win this week by far.
I agree.
And you have to finish the way that you start here, and that's just Chucky Keaton is the real deal. He's a great quarterback. We are a conference of strong quarterbacks. And if you weren't putting Keaton in at least your top 2 as far as the best quarterbacks right now in the conference, you're crazy at this point.
Yeah. So those are really things to take away from our game of the week from last week. but it was just a joy to watch.
So something I want to talk about really quick. I think we hit our game of the week pretty darn well because I love
I agree.
football. I love everything about football, Preston. I don't know if you know this.
Yes, I do.
I love everything from the game itself to tailgate parties to uniforms to fields. We had a discussion earlier, and I want to get this on the air. What's your favorite football field? Not stadium or atmosphere, but specifically the field, the turf in the field in our conference.
Well, we mentioned really quickly last week about Wyoming's new field.
Mm-hmm.
I love that field. And okay, everyone's going to say, "Oh my gosh, these are Wyoming homers." Yeah, a little bit. We are, okay? We like a lot of things about Wyoming. I tweeted out this week that the uniform they're going to be wearing for this game that they're going to play against Northern Colorado, it looks awesome. But back to the field, I love the look of it, the mountains that they have on there. I think that given the color scheme, we've already talked extensively about the color scheme. Given the color scheme, they have done an excellent job with how to market this field, the look. It's beautiful. I'm looking at a rendering of it right now, and it's just, I love the mountains in the end zones, the contrasts of the alternating colors of turf, as well as the brown and yellow Mountain West logos with Jonah Field. It's a beautiful thing. What do you think about the best field in the conference?
You know what? There's a lot of argument that could go. I mean, I know this is another team we talked about a lot already, but Utah State has an extremely pretty field because they've got that dual turf look with the darker turf and the lighter turf.
Yeah.
And it's just a pretty look. I love San Diego State's field, to be honest, and I think it's just because I like their logo scheme. I kind of feel the same way about Hawaii. I'm a sucker for that whole tribal.
Yeah, well, when you have something so iconic, you know, that represents your heritage and your geography, I mean, you got to go with it.
It throws it. I think everything else, to be honest, is fairly stat quo, except I did find a funny photo that someone posted. It was a mock-up of it's Hawaii's new field, and they're the Rainbow Warriors, so it was all rainbow colors. Like, that'd actually be funny.
That would
Maybe give it a shot. But let's not lie to ourselves. We know the field that we need to talk about, and I know that we're at odds about this, so I want to get this out of the way. Preston, yes or no on the blue out in Boise?
I think it's a really cool marketing. Just get your name out there. I think that it's cool that it's different. There are a few things that I don't love about it. I was mentioning earlier that I don't like looking at it on a TV screen because my eyes are trained to look at green for sporting events. But the blue it's a genius move. I thought that, you know, there's really not a lot that you can say about any other field or any other stadium that's more iconic than a blue field.
Can I share my thoughts really quick?
You may.
Can I?
Mm-hmm.
Hate it.
You hate it?
I hate it. I can't stand it. Boise fans, tweet at me. Tell me how dumb I hate it. It gives me a headache. Most fields you go to, like if you go to a good crowd atmosphere and you need to bring earplugs, you need to bring ibuprofen and about a 12-pack of Diet Pepsi.
Give you a nice headache.
To Bronco Stadium, because it's the only way to nurse the headache you're going to get by looking at a blue screen of death, but it's their freaking field. I'm fine with it. I'm fine that it's original. I just think it's ugly. And I'm not a huge fan. And I understand, like, Boise fans are so behind it. It's a part of their culture. It's who they are. The Mountain West originally had a rule with Boise that you can have the blue field, which, how would you tell them not to?
Yeah.
But you can't run an all-blue uniform on the blue field because for some reason that poses a disadvantage. And this week they actually lifted that rule. So against Air Force, this week they're going to be wearing the whole blue. And Boise fans have been all ecstatic about it because it's a good opportunity for them. There's no other reason in the world other than I just think it looks hideous.
Yeah, well, you know, the blue, it's iconic. People talk about it all the time. I kind of like it. You hate it.
Yeah, I'll just have to watch the game in black and white. That's fine.
Hey, that's not a bad idea.
I'm not
actually.
gonna. I guess I'm not gonna freak out.
You're probably gonna lose some of the players on the field, though. I mean, isn't that what the whole argument against using the blue on blue?
They're just gonna disappear if they're wearing all blue, right?
Well, that's what a lot of people say. I don't understand that. I mean, it's a moving object with a white and yellow number, but whatever.
Well, welcome to everyone's excuse for losing to Boise State. But,
yeah, exactly.
But no, okay. So you're cool with it. I can't stand it, but I doubt it's going anywhere. So why don't we just go ahead and move on?
Oh yeah, it's gonna stick around.
So we got a whole lot of football next week that we need to talk about. So let's fly through some matchups. Let's run the hurry up.
Next play.
All right, what do we got next week?
Starting off on Friday, Air Force at Boise State.
We're starting off Air Force Boise State. Then New Mexico heads out to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to take on the Panthers.
Fresno State at Colorado.
Cody Fajardo and Nevada head out to Tallahassee to take on the Seminoles.
Cal Poly is going to be a little bit of a challenge for Colorado State in Fort Collins.
Time to open up Taco John's yet again as Wyoming hosts Northern Colorado.
Utah State looks to kill the Wildcats of Weber State in the first half.
And I promise this matchup will not be boring as Central Michigan heads out to UNLV.
I'm going to have to say that matchup's probably going to be boring.
It could be. Color schemes it is, my goodness.
The gray and the red and the yellow and the crimson.
Maybe UNLV can get a blue field. Maybe that'll help them.
Maybe that will. Or, you could just flip that on, take a 3.5 hour nap,
That's true.
Watch Tim Cornette run up the middle 40 times. But
that's true. So we'll see how that goes. So there's a quick run of how our matchups are going to look. But let's get to some of our biggest games. As you've known from our last podcast, we like to highlight when our guys try to face some.
Wait, what do you hear? What do you hear?
Is that the?
I think that's a Goliath alert.
Time for a Goliath alert.
Well, New Mexico at Pittsburgh. Yeah, it's a Goliath alert, I guess. It's the ACC, but it's the ACC. New Mexico is considered a big underdog, or a big underlobo, but it's not like
you didn't just do that.
I did. It's an underlobo.
Oh my
god. Sometimes I try to be funny. I'm not usually the funny guy on the podcast.
I liked it. Hashtag underlobo. Tweet that out at us.
But what are the stones that our David needs or has in his pouch to take down the Pittsburgh Panthers?
Oh, New Mexico?
Yeah.
Casey Carrier.
Carrier.
No question. If he gets half the yardage he did from this week, they have a shot at beating Pitt. I absolutely believe it.
I think that he'll get similar numbers. Pittsburgh, we don't know a lot about them so far this season. I mean, they got blown out by Florida State, but besides that, we haven't learned much. I think that New Mexico has just as good of a chance as anybody at this point. Casey Carrier is the man. 290 yards. How many touchdowns? 5 something crazy.
It's a big number.
And then that clutch touchdown, 21 yards in the overtime to clinch the win. That was, he is their weapon.
Yeah, most of these big Goliath games, a lot of what we harp is, defense, they need defense. I honestly think this could be a game where Casey Carrier can simply outscore Pitt, and I think it's possible.
I agree.
All right, moving on to, I don't know if we should even call this. Based on protocol, we can call it a Goliath alert, but it's more like Samson against Goliath, and that's Fresno State at Colorado. What rocks don't Fresno have? Doesn't Fresno have against Colorado?
Well, here's the thing. Like, we're facing a Goliath that's like 5'7". It's like this nerdy white guy from the Bronx. It's named Goliath.
That's his like D&D
Yeah,
name.
Exactly. Like, I'm Goliath. So Colorado.
Is that your D&D voice?
I hope that people are getting a good laugh out of this. But you look at this game, Fresno State's heavily favored. Derek Carr is going to do what he does. I mean, there's not a lot to say about Derek Carr other than he does Derek Carr things. And he throws the ball very accurately. He's got great wide receivers. Devontae Adams is going to light people up. And then Darren Smith will get maybe 1 or 2 interceptions again because that's what he does as well. So it's I think that we've got this one mostly in the bag.
On the Colorado end of things, Boulder's a beautiful city. Have you ever been to Boulder?
I've been around Boulder. I haven't been to the actual city of Boulder.
Oh, it's a beautiful city. Pearl Street is their main section. It's really, really cool. I love Boulder. It's one of my favorite cities. That's legitimately all I have on Colorado. I think Fresno rolls over them, to be honest with you.
Yep.
So now let's get to our fun Goliath Lord. I actually think this is going to be a fun matchup. Nevada at Florida State.
The Seminoles are a great team. I mean, they've got a great quarterback. They've got a lot of things going for them, but you never know. I know that we say this all the time. You never know with a guy like Cody Fajardo. I almost said Colin Kaepernick. Because he is such a talented guy. He had some really good plays against UCLA. Obviously, they did what they needed to do against Cal Poly. Not Cal Poly. UC Davis, one of those FCS teams. UC Davis.
The Aggies of UC Davis.
The Aggies of UC Davis. I actually, on a side note, I really like their logo, UC Davis. It's pretty cool.
It's clean.
Yeah, it's cool. I like the C with the horse in it. Anyway, I think Nevada could really surprise some people. I'm not saying they're going to win this game, but I do think that Cody Fajardo has a game very similar to the Chucky Keaton at Utah game. He's a dual threat quarterback. He's obviously a little bit more of a run first guy than a passing quarterback, but he can do it all. And I think that we're going to look for a really good game there.
Not necessarily in playing style, but mentality-wise, I think of Cody Fajardo a lot like a Michael Vick, which he has some games that aren't as effective, but you can't sleep on Cody Fajardo for a half second because he's going to blow you out of the water. And I think he's going to put together some big plays. He's going to make a lot of really intense noise. I think this could be a stage. This is a potential coming out stage for Cody because he has a chance to do a lot on a big stage, make a lot of impressive plays. But it's the Seminoles, and they're just that good this year.
Yeah.
They are an extremely effective team. They're making a lot of things fun, trying to revitalize the ACC, which is a team that's been dormant in football recently. But with them in Clemson, the ACC has been a lot of fun. And it's just been an extremely effective year for them. I just don't know. It's like I said before. It's most of these come down to defense, and how are you going to slow down Winston and Wilder and Freeman and that offense? I don't see it necessarily happening, but I expect Cody Fajardo to put up some impressive numbers and make some impressive plays.
I think that the defense led by Brock Hecking will play well. The best parallel that I can make is it'll be very similar to the Stanford-San Jose State game that we just saw this past weekend, where Nevada makes a game of it for a little bit, but by the end it's just kind of like we can't hang with those guys. I mean, I hate to say that on a Mountain West Conference podcast that we can't hang with the big boys because we obviously can, but it'll be tough.
On top of it, it's on a national stage, ESPN. Here's my big prediction. Here's what I want to ask you. What do you think is the probability Cody Fajardo gets a SportsCenter top 10 play? ESPN stage against Florida State.
I'd put it at a solid 25%.
I think it's good.
I think, getting on the top 10 is difficult, obviously, with all the stuff that's going on, but he's just that kind of guy that can make plays where you scratch your head and say, how in the heck did he do that? And so I'd say 25% to get on the top 10, but you may think differently.
I'm honestly going 40, but here's why. I think that Florida State is going to be very smart about trying to shut down any draw plays by Fajardo in the red zone. I don't think out of the red zone they're going to play as hard, and I could see him putting together a 40 to 50-yard run for a touchdown. I'm not saying it will. I'm putting it at a solid 40, though. I honestly think it could happen. If they do that, I think it's success enough for Nevada. If they can get a big play, get Cody Fajardo on the map, that's recruitment, that's impressiveness, that's playing well on a big stage. I just don't necessarily see victory there.
Yeah, I agree.
So really quick, let's hit a couple other matchups that we got going on, and I'd like to focus on some of the players that were impressive last week and see if they can maintain. So let's talk Chucky Keaton, those pesky linebackers at Utah State, and their matchup this weekend against Utah State. It's homecoming week.
Against Weber State.
Against Weber State.
You just said Utah State versus Utah State, which would be a fantastic game, by the way.
Let's do that on NCAA 14.
Yeah, hey, I like
USU
that idea.
against USU. Sorry. So yeah, Utah State hosts Weber State. It's homecoming weekend, so it'll be a packed house. Really, what this comes down to is, for me, it's not even about how well Chucky Keaton does. It's how well is Craig Harrison, their backup, going to do at this point. But let's talk a little bit about
that game.
About that game.
Well,
yeah. Sorry,
what it
there.
comes down for me is how many points does Chucky Keaton put up in the first half before they pull him? Because it'll get ugly fast. Weber State, this team allowed 70 points against Utah, and it'll be interesting to see how we can draw parallels between Utah State, with a common opponent in Weber State. Obviously, Weber State is an FCS team. They're a down program. I think they won like two games last year, which in the Big Sky Conference. So that's not so hot. But you look at this team, this matchup, Utah State is going to kill them. They're going to have their subs in really soon and get some quality experience for the second, third string guys.
I could not agree more. So, Wyoming, Northern Colorado, another big player last week was Brett Smith. They're taking it home and playing in front of that Laramie crowd on that shiny new field.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it's I don't know what I'm agreeing to, but it's a very similar situation. How many points does Brett Smith put up before he's pulled? I think Northern Colorado doesn't stand a chance. Brett Smith and Rufron, it's going to be ugly fast in that one as well. I think that these guys maintain, speaking about the two quarterbacks, very well. It's not like they're going to have a down game against these opponents. They'll just prove that the hype is deserved, and they're the real deal.
Okay. Now, really quick, we came off a really rough weekend last weekend, and I feel this weekend we're coming into our own. But what do we need? You and I have talked a lot about the state of our conference, and I'm going to go ahead and call out a football conference, and that's the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, formerly known
as the Big East.
And the thing about the Big East is that they are technically an AQ conference, an automatic qualifier, one of the Big Six.
Technically.
I like to call them, I'm going to be really honest, I'd like to call them the Big 5.5, because I just don't see that the AAC is that effective as a conference anymore. Coming into this season, I was very strong about saying the Mountain West far and above is better than the AAC, and in some cases, I thought they were better than the ACC. I saw a lot of big things. We came out of week one. We didn't play as effectively as we necessarily thought that we could. Had a really, really rough weekend. This week, we're coming into our own. I honestly still believe and stand by that argument that I made, but what do you think we need as a conference to do to maintain our argument of being a big-time conference? Because I think right now it's in question with a lot of people.
Well, it is because our out-of-conference schedule, and we'll talk about this later when we get to Ask the Jocks. There's a couple of questions about this.
Oh, fantastic.
But it hasn't been good for us. The Mountain West is looking weak. And for me, it really comes down to the polarization of the top half of the league and the bottom half of the league. Because every league is going to have good teams and bad teams. Obviously, you look at teams like Utah State and Wyoming, they lost close ones to teams that were supposedly much better than them. But you look at this, and I think that we just have to maintain our big names, have to put up big numbers.
Exactly.
Our big quarterbacks have to say, make statement games that they are the real deal. And that's my key. Just big names, put up big numbers.
I think our good teams need to be great teams. I think we need to play better on a national stage with some of our guys. I do want to say something, and I know that we harp a lot that we have big-time players that do well, but there was a year when the MAC had Ben Roethlisberger and Byron Leftwich, and they were two huge players who made a bunch of noise, who had very successful teams, and then that conference immediately went back to the bottom of the barrel. Yeah. It's not about players, it's about teams. Great conferences have great overall teams that are juggernauts, and we need to see our guys get convincing wins. A team like Fresno that should be getting very convincing victories needs to play more smash mouth football, and I think the same of some of our bigger teams, we really need to show that they're forces that can't be stopped.
And it's about consistency. Like you said, we can't just be a great conference because of a few great players who graduate and then all of a sudden we're at the bottom of the barrel. We need to be consistent. These programs need to build themselves up into a system that works, not so much just players.
Absolutely. And I think pound for pound, if you look at it on paper, that argument's still there. I still think we're one of the top football conferences when you compare us to some of the bottom of those Big Six conferences. It's time to start playing like it. And I think last week was a good indicator of what we can do. The closer we get to conference play, we really need to prove that. And I think that the next, maybe not this week because there are a lot of easier opponents, but in the future weeks it needs to happen. And I'm excited to see where that goes. But you brought up a really good point, and that it is time for us to play Ask the Jocks.
Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. Does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe?
First question for Ask the Jocks comes from W.A. Aggie Fan. He asks, Mountain West Conference out of schedule, out of conference, has looked horrible. What will it take to bring the bottom of the conference up to the middle 1/3 of FBS? So that's kind of a complex question. He's talking about the bottom of our conference, bringing him up to like the 60s, 70s area.
Coaching, in my opinion, because we have so many teams that have been impressive in first halves, have stayed close, have shocked bigger teams, have shocked teams from out of conference, but the coaches of the opposing teams have made the necessary adjustments to shut us down. And it really comes down to the strength of our coaches. Okay, Norm Chow at Hawaii is a skilled coordinator. And the only way he's going to show that he's a skilled coach is if he knows how to make necessary halftime adjustments. And I don't think that's something that's really been happening conference-wide.
Maybe not making the adjustments per se, because like you said, we really hang with teams in the first half, but then we just fall flat because they make the adjustments. It's more of continuing to be able to execute. I honestly, this question is a tough one for me to answer. I just think that we have to be better prepared.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to point out is it needs to stop being about moral victories and it needs to be about victories. I mean, we can stay here and say San Jose State did such a good job against Stanford and they really stepped up to the big brother, but we both said they were going to beat Stanford.
Yeah, we
and
really thought that they could,
yeah.
And they didn't. Same thing with Utah State and Utah.
Yeah.
So it really just comes down to, yeah, like you said, coaching and going for those victories, not the moral victories.
Absolutely.
Next question. Tim Hansen sends us in, how bad are the Aztecs? Is Dingwell the only problem, or is it Rocky Long? I don't think it's Rocky Long. In terms of quarterbacking, yes, Adam Dingwell has been very bad. I think that we already addressed that. How bad are they? They look like they're bad. And
they have to absolutely prove to me that they're an effective football team, and they're not doing it.
I was high on these guys. I loved this team, and then they completely let me down. And that's not cool.
And we beat up on Adam Dingwell a lot in his ineffectiveness, but I'm mainly disappointed in this defense, and I really think that is what's contributing to them being as ineffective as they are, to be honest.
I agree. All right, next question comes from Kyle Haywood. He asks, who looks to be the biggest challenger to Fresno for the West Division? That's a really good question because Fresno, yeah, they looked all right in their game this past week. They were playing a Cal Poly team that played pretty well. They got up early, and then Coach DeRuiter just put in the subs, which almost kind of came back to bite him because the boys from Cal Poly put up a fight. I think that right now, to answer that question, San Jose State all day long. I think the Spartans are the biggest challenger.
Fresno's had a hard time absolutely flattening teams and just shutting them down. And if you keep it close, San Jose State's going to beat you. I think San Jose State right now, I don't think there's a necessary favorite in the West. I think it's going to be between those two teams.
Well, with Fresno, you look at the teams that they've faced, Rutgers and Cal Poly, obviously not a huge sample, but with those games, they were passing the ball pretty effectively. And you look at David Fales, and if he can rip apart that Bulldog defense, then absolutely the Spartans have a chance. And Nevada could really challenge if one of those, for instance, if Fresno loses a freak game to, say, UNLV, which I don't think is going to happen, but say they do, then they could, Nevada could be right in that mix.
Well, yeah, and you've got a strong David Fales-led offense against that Fresno defense that's been extremely underwhelming of what they should play. It's been 4 episodes since we very seriously brought up Darren Smith.
Yeah, I agree.
Who it was the consensus vote for Defensive Player of the Year. And they pose a lot of threat on there that just has not been shown.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the defense doesn't know how to step it up, it's very easy that San Jose walks all over them.
All right, well, there's that question. There's a follow-up question from Kyle Haywood. And this is the last question of the week. Also, will Brett Smith pass the quote-unquote big 3, Keaton, Carr, and Fales, QBs in the Mountain West Conference by year's end? If so, at what point does he do that?
That's a great question.
That is a very, very good question. I look at Brett Smith and what he is able to do, and I think that he really could surpass a Derek Carr. I like Derek Carr. I think that a lot of what he has done is because of his weapons around him, being able to throw to those guys. Brett Smith doesn't have as many weapons around him, but Robert Huron is fantastic. In this past game, he had 5 catches for 123 yards. So Brett Smith knows how to use the weapons that are around him, and Dominic Ruffran is also a very good wide receiver. So when he has those weapons and he can throw to them, he's a very good quarterback. He also can run. His totals right now for this season are, so far, just 2 games, are very close to his rushing totals from last year total. So that's very impressive so far. Let me just look up what he's got for rushing, but it's quite impressive. It's not giving me the rushing stats. Why don't you give me the rushing stats? I'll find them. But he is a very capable dual threat quarterback. Oh wait, here we go.
He has 156 rushing yards.
Yeah, there we go.
So far this season.
So I mean, that's not bad, and that's against Nebraska and Idaho. Idaho isn't great, but Idaho's defense actually looked decent for a little bit of that game.
Definitely, and I'm actually going to take a moment and be pretty critical of Brett Smith, and this is that you can say a lot about his numbers and his abilities. If you're going to surpass David Fales, Derek Carr, Chucky, you've got to beat their team. And for me, late October 26th, they go to San Jose, then they host Fresno, and it's not till November 30th that they go to Utah State. They've got to win one of those games. Now, they've got some winnable games in between that. I honestly think they're going to be a good force against Boise, and I think that could be a good coming-out party for Brett Smith against Boise. And obviously, they're going to pound Hawaii, but they've got to win that game. And the thing is that he can pose a victory against that team head-to-head against one of those quarterbacks and really show just what an effective leader that he can be. That's the only crux that I take with it, is he can throw for 500 yards and he can rush for 120, but if he loses to San Jose State, David Fales will look like the better quarterback because he wins.
I agree. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say that the game at home against Fresno State is his coming-out party. I think they'll have a good game at San Jose State, but I give the Spartans just a slight edge for being at home. Fresno State has very much, like you said, underwhelmed defensively, and Brett Smith will be able to pick those apart. I'm going to say that he comes out and establishes himself as a better quarterback than Derek Carr, which is, in some people's minds, crazy that I would say that. That game, he's going to say, I am a legit quarterback. I'm better than Derek Carr.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely couldn't agree with you more. So that's everything for Ask the Jocks. We're about ready to head on home and leave you to the rest of your merry way. But really quick, it's time that we end the show the way we always do, by asking that question. Preston, what did we learn?
That is a very good question, my friend. I learned in talking with you before the episode and and during our recording that we have to step it up as a conference to establish this as a conference that can beat people. And then the second thing that I learned is that the Wampus Cats are just terrible and disappointing. And as a fan of the Aztecs, I am very sad to see that happen.
Two things that I learned. One thing I want to bring up. There's a school we pretty much have not brought up in weeks, and that's Colorado State. And I want Colorado.
Feel bad about that.
I want Colorado State fans within the range of my ear. Give us a reason to talk about your school. I know that there are some people that have got a hold of us and said, hey, you don't talk enough about our school, or you talk too much about these people. That's because there are certain teams that just make more sense to chat about. Some because they're good and some because they're very bad, if you noticed. And you know what, CSU? I'd love to talk about how you're doing out in Fort Collins. Go ahead and throw a reason at me. The other thing I learned is we've got some fun matchups this week, so bring an extra pair of underlobos, because you never know if you're going to need them. Lots of exciting football coming. That's everything for today. We sure hope that you enjoyed listening to us. Again, follow us always on Twitter at MWC Rock Jocks. Check out all the other shows that we have here on the wonderful Front Row Network. But until then, we'll see you next week. I'm Steve Schwartzman.
I'm Preston Croshaw.
Join the climb.